Zach, how do you actually harvest and clean the seeds?
So each species is different, kind of on its own time scale, but generally most seeds are dry seed. So you do it this dry method where whether it even be a squash, if you open up that squash, collect the seeds, dry them off in the dehydrator, and then they're dry enough where you could go through this winnowing process and winnow off any chaff or any of the other plant parts so you get clean seed. So that's the same as a dried bean or our Arikara sunflower, and you could see the chaff of the chaff is a fancy word, or maybe not so fancy word for just other plant parts that'll blow away, and the gravity will take that seed down while the wind through this machine that we have called a winnow wizard will actually blow that chaff out. So we could run that a few times and then not only get the chaff and other plant parts out to get the clean seed, but we could actually run it a few times to get the heavier seed. So the heavier seed has more chance to germinate. It's more has more vigor typically. So we'll also select for heavier seed and let a lot of that smaller seed go and be safer with a heavier seed. So there's other methods, and something like a tomato uses a water winnowing method. So we squish the tomato up with a big masher stick. We get a 5-gallon bucket of one variety, and you have to be careful not to use that masher stick in another variety, but you mash up the tomatoes really nice and good, and you could add a little water, and then those tomato seeds will actually ferment over a period of time, maybe 3-4 days. And then after that, you're adding water, and then you're slowly pouring the water out, which has the tomato parts, but not the seed. The seed actually falls to the bottom of the bucket because it's more dense, it's heavy, and so you'll do this a number of times. And what that fermentation process did was it fermented off that gelatinous goop that surrounds that seed with a beneficial bacteria, so that's protecting the seed. And then after you finish water winnowing, you'll throw your seed into a sieve, and then you could smack that onto wax paper, which I just put into a dehydrator. And when I dehydrate seeds, I never put on the heat mechanism, just the fan, because seeds are alive. They will die if they're over 90 degrees. So you want to keep them always below around 85 degrees if possible. So when you're drying seeds, constant airflow, one layer of seed, don't pile them up, and just keep that air going. And after a good amount of time of doing it, you could tell when the seeds really get dry, and that's when you package. And I use silica gel packets to store the seed. It sucks a little bit more moisture out, and yeah, and then they're ready to go into storage.
Where do you keep the seed over the winter?
So I didn't have an ideal situation this past winter, but something that's happening actually right now as we speak, building a seed storage facility. So it's going to be underground. Underneath the ground, it's a constant 50 degrees, so which is really good for seeds. And if you think about it, seeds are in the ground. That's where they lay dormant. All these different kinds of seeds that are just naturally there sitting. So it's mimicking that. And then also we're using a dehumidifier to suck out further moisture from that room so it won't be too wet, because typically a basement room will be about 70% humid. We're going to try to suck it down to about 20 or 30%, which will be ideal.
How do you know how much to produce each year?
We usually just produce as much as we possibly can. We have an idea about how much we sell and how much to grow. So just to give an idea, for tomatoes, I'll like to grow at least 100 plants, if not 200, of one variety. And that'll give enough seed for more than 2 years for us. So the key to a seed company is to store your seeds really well, because if you could store your seeds really well, then they're germinating at high percentages, 95 to 99%, for longer, and then you don't have to do grow outs of those varieties as often. So this seed storage facility we're building is super important for a number of reasons, but in terms of profitability and being able to support all of our growers and everything that we do, it's a vital piece to store the seeds to have them living for as long as they possibly can.
How do you check for germination?
So that's a great question. With Minnesota state seed law, we have to do a germination that's 100 seeds with 4 repetitions. So it's a really, really good germination test where we have specific requirements for each species. So tomatoes like to germinate around 75, 80 degrees. Peppers actually need a little bit of light to trigger that germination. We do everything actually at a small scale in coolers, and we could heat that cooler exactly to the temperature of that species. And then we are required to write that germination percent on the back of each packet, and those seeds will expire in a year. So we have to get those seeds out in 1 year, and every year we germinate our seeds and give a percentage.
That leads me to, how do you market your seeds?
So, great question. We have a Facebook page, we have a website. We sell most of our seeds on our website. We're thinking about doing a catalog soon, but the website's worked so far. We've got a lot of subscribers, so northcircleseeds.com. If you just go to the website and browser, we've got about 50 varieties. Last year, we'll have about 20 more this year added. But if you write your email and subscribe, you'll get email blasts of a lot of our discounts. We do a pretty big discount campaign in the spring on specific varieties, and you might see 15% off for a weekend or something like that.
This has been so interesting. Thanks so much for letting us come out and learn about your operation.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. This has been a great experience.